This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard but didn't. Representative Grayson putting heat on the Fed. G20 meets in Pittsburgh and protesters come face to face with government thugs. Prison labor for profit, the ugly side of human resources. Novartis developing chip implant to remind you to take your drugs. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News.
Federal Reserve ever tried to manipulate the U.S. stock market? You're the attorney, right?
That's right.
So you might not even know, right?
I would expect to know if there were something like that being done. I'm not aware of that at all.
And if you did know, you'd be bound by attorney-client privilege and you wouldn't be able to tell us, right? So we agree that any participation by the Federal Reserve in the stock market or the futures market is outside the Federal Reserve's legal authority, right?
I think your question is too categorical, but...
I think not, actually. Why don't you answer it?
I don't know, your question is so overbroad, I don't know where to begin to answer that.
I don't think it's that overbroad. I'd like you to tell me whether it's within the Federal Reserve's legal authority to try to manipulate the stock market or the futures market.
So I don't believe the Federal Reserve tries to manipulate the stock market or the futures.
Come on.
No, so...
Do they?
And the extent that the Federal Reserve influences interest rates, it does make announcements of that decision immediately.
That's not what I said. I said manipulate the stock market or the futures market. Wouldn't we want to know? Yes or no?
Could you define what you mean by
I think you know what I mean, Mr. Alvarez. Now, wouldn't it be very helpful to have a GAO audit on that subject? Wouldn't it?
I don't know what it is that you're seeking to audit, sir.
What I just said. Good. Now, there's been all sorts of claims of insider trading and front-running by the people who execute the trades for the Federal Reserve in the market. By the way, who is that? Who actually executes the trades for the Federal Reserve in the markets?
The Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
That's your answer?
You wanted to know who implements...
You have people sitting in screens at the Federal Reserve Bank actually executing those trades.
Federal Reserve Bank of New York executes transactions through primary dealers.
Okay. Who are the primary dealers?
So the list of primary dealers is on our website.
Do you know any of them? Can you name a single one?
Sure. JPMC.
Go ahead, what?
JP Morgan Chase.
Okay. Do you mind if we have a GAO audit to see whether there's been front-running or insider trading by them? Do you mind? Is that okay with you?
I'm not sure I have any decision-making authority.
Well, you're the general counsel. I want to know if you're going to try to stop it. Let's say that the Federal Reserve gave $1 billion to a very promising fledgling institution called the Dick Cheney Savings and Loan, whose only asset is an unnumbered Swiss bank account. Don't you think it would be a good idea to have the GAO have authority to look into that? But I really think we need answers to these questions, and the only way to get answers to these questions is to have the GAO audit the Federal Reserve. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, September 27, 2009. Representative Alan Grayson turns the screws on the Federal Reserve's General Counsel this week. We don't have the time to show you the entire exchange, but you must see this 5-minute video. The link is under more info in our video description section. The main point of Grayson's harsh questioning is to highlight the need for auditing the Fed. Without an audit, we really don't know what's going on with Federal Reserve lending and security swap practices. Grayson should also be held as an example of how a representative of the people should question witnesses appearing before Congress. The G20, made up of the 19 largest economies plus the EU, met in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this week. Nothing of significance came from the actual meetings, but it gave the opportunity for world leaders to give rambling speeches that no one paid attention to. As is usually the case, most of the action took place outside on surrounding streets as the annual meeting of the G20 attracts protesters from all over the world. Civil liberties groups decried what they called a heavy-handed and unwarranted police response, saying riot officers focused on largely peaceful demonstrations, when they should have been paying more attention to smaller groups of vandals that smashed windows of city businesses. The U.S. Constitution mandates that the rights of the people to peaceably assemble shall not be abridged. The government was quick to send out riot police to make the protesters go away. There was quite a debate whether the following video was real or staged. Take a look. Those making the case for this being staged point to the various camouflage uniforms and the possible non-government license plate. Arguments for authenticity include the presence of other law enforcement personnel and vehicles, particularly 2 riot police officers providing backup and warnings to bystanders. Convincing proof lies in another photo that was taken later on that showed the same protester handcuffed on the ground next to the same car, surrounded by the military personnel who snatched him. The snatches were either special forces or a military counterinsurgency team trained in snatch and grab techniques. They don't teach what they did at the local police academy. America, 2009. Military, policing our streets. A recently published book called Zaytoun chronicles one man's experience in what may have been America's first FEMA prison. After staying behind during Hurricane Katrina to protect his properties, Abdul Zaytoun found himself taken away by men in black uniforms and placed into a FEMA detention center known as Camp Greyhound. No charges, no Miranda, no phone call. Built by FEMA within hours of the hurricane's landfall, it was an outdoor jail in New Orleans Central Bus Station. Similar to Guantanamo Bay, Camp Greyhound was a kennel with runs of wire fencing and concrete flooring. There was nothing to sit or sleep on, and toilet facilities were portables outside the enclosures. He and others were physically and verbally abused, pepper sprayed, stripped, and body cavities searched. The details of his and other captivity became increasingly outrageous. The detention of a firefighter and a cleanup worker are also detailed in the book. All charges against all of them were eventually dropped. This week, November.org had an article about the rapidly growing use of prison labor by private industry. Prison inmates have become true human resources in an ever-surging prison industrial complex. 30 states contract prison labor to private corporations. Prison industry sales have grown from $393 million in 1989 to $1.81 billion in 1995. Federal prison laborers are exempt from constitutional protections and state regulations regarding safety, benefits, and minimum wage. This story came to our attention through the Reality Report. Both the Reality Report and the November.org article links are listed in our video description section. Novartis is testing technology that inserts a tiny microchip into each pill swallowed and sends a reminder to patients by text message if they fail to follow their doctor's prescription. A receiver implanted into the shoulder of the patient relays the signal to the cell phone. This new effort by Novartis is to boost what they call compliance, making sure people take their pill on time. A man sitting quietly was enjoying a movie at his local theater when he was confronted by 4 police officers. They asked him to get up and proceeded to forcibly escort him outside. Mr. St. John, not breaking any laws, complied with the officer's demand. One important note, Mr. St. John, a private citizen, was legally carrying a firearm in a holster on his hip. The police proceeded to disarm him, search him, and do a background check. Upon finding nothing to hold against Mr. St. John, the officers told him that he could go back into the movie only after he stored the firearm in his vehicle. Fast forward 1 year. U.S. District Court Judge Bruce Black ruled that Mr. St. John's Fourth Amendment rights were violated by the officers for unreasonable search and seizure. He was openly carrying a holstered handgun, conduct which is legal in 42 states and requires no license in New Mexico and 25 other states. In his ruling, the judge also held that the officers can be held personally liable for the constitutional violation. The case now goes before a jury to assess if any damages should be awarded to Mr. St. John. Police officers don't always know the law, and they need to be aware that they will be held to account for making it up as they go. Thanks for joining us this week. We need an informed America, so please tell your friends and family about ICN. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, have a great week.